now that we've talked about these tech companies as utilities, and like you said, it might just get a bit more too expensive for us to even go into it fully unless we have the right legislative enforcement in place, right? And I guess that will only really happen if we get more young people into government, right? People who understand the internet. Because I remember when Mark Zuckerberg was being interviewed by the Senate Committee on Technology, and they were like, essentially like your grandpa calling you up, opening up his Facebook app and saying, "How come I can't read my email?" Right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, the legislators they had to ask him to explain what cookies were.
Yeah, and it's just that was so cool.
I was gonna say, if we're looking for younger legislators, why don't you run? But then I forgot you're 37, so that's you don't fit under the category. Sorry.
God, right.
Come on, you teed me up for that one.
Right through the heart. Okay, fine. It's all right. I look young, so I think that works. It's all good.
Young at heart.
But yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Andrew Yang, because he sort of has a spiritual kindred spirit, in the Senate in the form of Elizabeth Warren, right? Who has some pretty radical ideas when it comes to technology, right? And if Andrew Yang, is the kid brother, then Elizabeth Warren is definitely the big sister when it comes to all of this. And she has floated the idea, and it was part of her presidential election manifesto, if I remember correctly, where one of the first things that she wanted to do was to break up all of big tech. Okay, and that's huge, right? I mean, on so many levels, and she specifically name dropped Facebook, Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon, right? These were like specific examples that she said were tech companies that were just way too big and needed to be broken up, right? First question before we even go any further into this: do you agree?
That's a tough question, Rafi. And I think that if I had to lean one way or another, I would agree. There is the Aaron 18-year-old libertarian that's screaming at myself right now for even saying these words. It's like, remember when you voted for Ron Paul? But like, it's I'm not 18 anymore, so it's so that part of me does believe in capitalism and does believe in entrepreneurship and does believe in the beauties of a free market and competition, and obviously it's there's so many positive things that come out of that.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, we are facing unprecedented challenges with this, especially with the big tech companies, and it seems like they have monopolies in some sense, and it's handicapping competition. I mean, look at Apple, for instance. The fact that they have one of the world's best-selling smartphones, and they completely control the Apple Store, the App Store within their phones, allows them to do things that just aren't fair. Like, if you type in Spotify, or I remember if you did for a while, if you typed in Spotify into the App Store, Apple Music would show up before it, Yeah. So, I mean, that's just clear. I mean, it's a smart business move on Apple's part, and that's why I'm not saying that, like you understand why they're doing it. It's like they're creating a horizontal and vertical and every which way sort of business model so they can just dominate. But that domination seems to possibly have passed a point of fairness for everybody else. And we're seeing, these companies growing stronger by the day, by the month, by the year. Amazon, like you said, Apple, even Netflix could even go in that category eventually, Microsoft, Facebook. And it's really crushing a lot of other businesses, and nobody can compete because of how powerful they are.
Yeah, I mean, like, you name drop Apple. My feelings about Apple, and their very anti-competitive nature, right? And like, I think we can agree, in terms of like what Apple is doing. It's great. Yeah, I agree with you. Great business decisions, right? Not so great in terms of like competitiveness. Also, not so great in terms of maybe user experience for people who are looking to go beyond like what Apple has intended for them to do, right? I think the phrase has always been applied to Apple is that it's a beautiful setup, right? How it looks, the interfaces are slick, the hardware is sleek, all of that stuff, right? And it's a beautiful garden, but it's a walled garden, right? It's just only we sell only we sell access to this. No one else can play in here, right?
Yeah.
And like, I just think that it in terms of choice that consumers can have. If you go in for Apple, then you're locked into that ecosystem. If you have an iPhone, then most likely you'll be using a MacBook. If you ever decide to get a desktop, it's going to be an iMac or Power Mac, that kind of thing. If you want to buy a monitor, then you better buy an Apple branded monitor. Their Retina displays, that sort of thing. So you're locked into that whole thing, and then from there it's just Apple Music, Apple Pay, the App Store, Apple Arcade.
I just got my
Apple
Apple Watch like 3 days ago. I'm in love with it. Rafi, doesn't it look so cool?
Yeah.
I love my Apple Watch. Anyways, though, I completely agree with what you're saying. Even as an Apple, even as an Apple lover. But it's not just Apple. It's we could talk about Google. We could talk about Amazon the exact same way. I think Amazon could be even the biggest one in terms of just because you want to talk about Elizabeth Warren talking about breaking up these companies. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of interesting to think about how many different companies you could break up from one of these companies, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And actually, before we went on air today, I did give my writing team a little bit of a fun mental exercise, right? Where I said to them, okay, you know what? If I gave you these 5 tech companies, how many companies could you spin off or break up to create separate business units or entities on their own within each of these companies, right? So where do you want to start? Okay, since we talked about Apple, let's start with Apple, okay? And I got to give credit to Sarah for this one because she took the lead on Apple. And
shout out to QDog.
Shout out to QDog. Yeah, she's giggling and smiling right now because she got a shout out. Yeah, she loves the attention. We all know she does. So. The new Apple group, right? Once it's broken down into its, component forms, right? She has designed it in such a way that it would have 4 different companies can be spun off from it, right?
So just to clarify, Rafi, you're saying that if Apple was broken up, this is the way that you guys sort of envisioned it happening?
Yeah. So this is how she would see it happening, right?
Lay it on me.
Yeah. So she goes hardware division, right? Which would be the manufacturing side of it that builds all of the iPhones, the AirPods, the watch, the MacBooks and everything and stuff like that. Yes. Okay. Yes. Please flex your watch. Right. So these are the ones that would actually build the hardware, right? Then you would have the software side, right? Which would be iOS, which would be, things like iTunes, all the various software that they have that, Mac OS, these things, right? Their software stack could be something on its own. So whatever platform that you have, for example, if you consider Apple TV as a separate OS on its own or a piece of software, imagine installing Apple TV on your very own TV box, that kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. You could optionally install it on an Apple TV box, or you could install it on something else. So that was the thinking behind that. And then you have their research and development division that produces processors, right? So right now you've got the A series processor in your iPhone and your Apple Watch, right? Yeah, there you go. And there's the M series processors that are in the new MacBooks, right? And then there's an S, T, W, and H. There are so many different processors that they're currently developing. And last but not least, it would be services, right? Or services / apps, right? So Apple Music, because Apple Music on its own, think about it, Spotify on its own has grown to such a huge number, and it's essentially just one service, which is streaming music, right? And I remember we talked before that Spotify will probably go into video at some point this year.
Yeah, but as of right now, Apple Music is just the same thing as Spotify, and that is just a single small facet of Apple's empire.
Yeah. But then imagine it being parked as under their services suite, like Apple Music, Apple Pay, the App Store itself, Apple Arcade, where you access all of their games and everything. So that would be their services suite. So this is Sarah's vision of how she would break up Apple.
Sarah's a smart lady.
Yep, she definitely is. Yeah, she's doing a hair flip right now.
It's quite interesting looking at this list because you do see, first of all, just how massive of an empire Apple is with all of these different facets to their business. It would be a messy breakup, though, I feel like, because they're so intertwined in one another. Yep. I feel like, granted, I don't know how the inner workings of the Apple Corporation works, so maybe it'd be easier than I think. But as opposed to something like breaking up Facebook, where it's like, hey, you got 3 different programs here. You got WhatsApp, you got Instagram, you got Facebook. Split, right? So as to where breaking up big tech in terms like Facebook seems like a little bit cleaner or an easier of a job. I'm sure it's infinitely more complicated than I'm making it. But Apple, it does seem like the way that their hardware and their software is fused together and they have this ecosystem, breaking them up, that'd be a challenge.
How would you break up Facebook?
How would I break up Facebook?
Yeah, so we've done Apple. Let's do Facebook. How would you split up Facebook?
I mean, I don't know if I want to clarify for the record. I don't know if I agree that Facebook should be split up just 100%. Yeah, I don't have a 100% formulated political opinion on this. But I think just as the way I said, I mean, it's clearly 3 enormous companies, and I think that just saying, hey, WhatsApp has to be sold. Like, that's just a really clean way to do it, you know? Same thing with and if the legislation wanted them to also, with Instagram, you just gotta say, hey, time to sell Instagram. Easy as that. Obviously, they are connected in a lot of ways, and they share data in a lot of ways, and Facebook would be so butthurt about that, and they'd bitch and they'd moan and be like, this is so hard. But I feel like that would be a nice, clean split. Obviously, there's a lot more to Facebook than just those 3 things, but I think that would be a really good way to start. How about you?
Okay, I would actually split up Facebook itself. Okay, so like Instagram, WhatsApp, we can put aside. That's the easy bit. Okay, that's the easy bit because they're branded. They can survive on their own, right? I would also take off Oculus, which is their VR division, which they bought over from Palmer Luckey. That would also spin off on its own, right? Facebook itself. Now here's the thing: Facebook is a whole bunch of products that are all mashed together and turned into a feed. Okay, that's what Facebook essentially is for people that are looking at it, right? But I would split it off into component forms in the sense that if you want something that's just for you to keep in touch with your friends, Facebook Friends, that's it, that's one product. Then you have Facebook News. Again, this is something that we used to have back in the day. You know, remember Flipboard? Remember, all these news aggregator like apps that we used to have that would pull news from different sources, right? And then serve you whatever it is that you want. Facebook News could be its own thing, right? Another one could just be, Facebook Gaming, for example, for them to do their streaming stuff, right? Where they have influencers or whatever doing streaming. Right, and then to cut across all of this, I would then actually have Facebook ads spun off, but then serves all of these platforms, and then it would be on its own Facebook ads.
Now, I get what you're saying with that because these seem like distinct products and distinct services. But let's say you do that with Facebook and they sell Instagram to some other company. Do you do the same thing to Instagram then as well? Do you say Instagram Stories and Instagram Grid and Instagram Shopping and Instagram Messaging are now 4 separate products as well?
Yeah.
You know, what about Twitter? You know, what about TikTok? You know, now I'm just saying, like, this is where it gets dicey because then you don't know where to draw the line.
Exactly. But then you see for me, it's like, let's split them up first and then see what happens. Like I'm at the point in time where it's sort of I'm very close to being one of those like we have to burn it all down and then rebuild.
Yeah, you're just ready to burn this MFer down. Yeah, I got you. Just like stir the pot and see what happens, right?
Yeah. So that's how I would do it. I would split up Facebook into 4 component businesses aside from its branded products that it already owns. That's what I would do for Facebook. Okay, so let's move on to another giant. Right. This one was actually done by Vaish. Okay, Vaish, who actually directed and scripted our episode about cancel culture, which you weren't part of, but you can always watch it, and share us your insights on cancel culture. But she did Google, right? And her research basically goes along the lines of, if it makes money on its own, it should survive on its own. That's her view of the matter, right?
Okay.
So, I know we're running a bit short on time, so I'm just going to quickly run through her business units, right, for Google. Google AdWords/AdSense, that's one business unit. Gmail and G Drive, one business unit. Google Fiber, one business unit. YouTube, one business unit. And Google Chrome, one business unit, right? Pixel/Android, one business unit. That's how she would split up Google.
That sounds complicated.
It is. Because
sounds complicated. But, it's interesting when you see it broken down like that, just how many facets there are to the empire that is Google. But it's it's a tough pill to swallow, I think. Or just it's the idea is good, but actual implementation of this.
Yeah.
But you're ready for it, Rafi. You're just like let's burn it down.
Yeah, because you see, right, there are other, like, if you look at these component pieces, right, there are competitors in each space, right? Just that they're not competing very well, right?
Yeah.
AdWords, for example, or in AdSense, you have other ad network competitors. Gmail, obviously, there's other email providers. Google Fiber, other broadband providers. YouTube, you have like Vimeo and Dailymotion, right? Google Chrome, you have like Firefox and Microsoft Edge to some degree. Pixel and Android, you have iPhone and iOS, right, as the main competitor, right? Pixels as the mobile phones, you have Samsung and Huawei and who else? And Android's main competitor is iOS. So all of these business units do have their own competitors, so they could, in theory, survive on their own. That's what we're looking at.
Theoretically, I agree with you.
Theoretically, yeah.
Realistically, it's gonna be tough.
It is. Okay. So I think we've got a bit more time to just cover just a couple more of the conglomerates here, right? Let's
make it happen.
Okay. Dana took on the job of breaking up Microsoft. Okay. And I will quickly run through how she sees their product stack being diversified, or their business units. Number one would be software, where you'd have all of the Office suite. So OneDrive, OneNote, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all that. Teams would be all under Microsoft software. Microsoft Developer and IT tools would be the next one. You have .NET, Visual Studio, and Azure. Okay. Then you have their consulting business, where they help enterprises with their IT solutions, right? You have streaming. Okay, and then of course you have gaming, the Xbox ecosystem, right, and Windows gaming. So that
one seems like a cleaner split to me.
Five.
It's a clean divorce, yeah.
Dana's happy that you like her split of how we divide.
I like all the splits. Okay, They're like my kids. I just like some a little bit more than others, is all.
So we're fine. If we could try to break up Microsoft, we'd do it like this, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And last but not least, our new guy, Jake, who's just joined us this week, took on the task of splitting up Amazon. Okay? And Jake's recommendation would be business unit number one.
I imagine how that conversation was. Hi, Jake. Welcome to the First Page Singapore office. Please come up with a blueprint for splitting up Amazon. Thank you.
He enjoyed it. He definitely enjoyed it. He has a 4 divisions that Amazon would split up into. Number one would be their e-commerce and logistics division, right? Second would be their web services and cloud computing. Okay, Amazon Web Services, cloud computing,
AWS.
Yep. Third would be their streaming platforms, which would be Twitch and Amazon Prime. Okay, and last but not least would be their AI assistants. In this case, Alexa. And I think I'll tag this on Jake if you don't mind. Probably, any future R&D software development that they would have that would go under the 4th branch of their business. So I think Amazon here, the e-commerce platform on its own though would generate like how much revenue though, right? Like even if we were trying to split it up.
Oh, seriously, especially if you add the logistics into that part.
Yeah.
I mean, that's if you broke that up, it would probably still be one of the biggest companies in the freaking world. So, and then you take AWS into the mix as well. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, definitely. And that's it. That's us splitting up big tech in all.
Did we just split up big tech, Rafi?
I think we just did, and I think we did it quite well. Yeah, so
wow.
Credit to the team, by the way, for putting this one together.
Good job, team.
Yeah, and actually there was I know we're trying to wrap this up, but and maybe we should discuss this in a future episode. But there is one genuine question here that is always brought up against splitting up these tech companies, right? The one thing that they all have in common is that number one, they're American. Okay. And number two, right, these ethical considerations and this kind of scrutiny is not being spotlighted on tech giants in other parts of the world, like the ones in China or the ones in Russia, right? So then the question is, begs to be asked, right? Is it actually a good thing to break up these tech companies when other tech companies in other markets around the world are not facing these same ethical scrutinies?
Are you asking me because I'm American?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Damn it. Okay, as the American of the group, I mean, I think that's an interesting conversation to be had, because
Mm-hmm.
you have a lot of people calling on these large tech companies to be broken up in the United States. Yet these Chinese tech companies and the Russian, well, it's really the Chinese tech companies, and they're not going to get broken up anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it is in the best national interest to keep these tech companies together, because the stronger the company, the stronger their data, the stronger the nation. So I'm not saying I agree with this, but there is an argument out there that by breaking up big tech companies like Facebook, like Amazon, like Microsoft in the States, that you then weaken the United States' position as a tech giant, as a superpower, because it seems, in the tech world that we are exponentially just plowing towards, how technologically savvy and how technologically powerful you are is how powerful you are, right? I mean, that's everything. So
Yeah.
I could see from a political perspective where people would want to say, hey, let's take a step back, because the Chinese government is not trying to break up their tech companies. They're throwing money into them to make sure they can continue growing and continue strengthening. So I get that perspective. How about you?
Okay. Have you played Cyberpunk 2077?
I don't think I've played a video game since 2014.
Okay, so one of the subplots in the game, right, is that there are two corporations, right, that are actually at war with each other. Okay, one of them is a Japanese corporation called Arasaka, and the other
Sounds very
is,
Japanese.
and the other is an American company called Militech. Okay, and
Sounds pretty American.
yeah, and it got to the point where these companies, in the game, in the prequels that you find out before the main storyline that you play in, that they actually had a war, an actual war that was, involving actual guns and bullets and everything, right?
Between the corporations.
Between the corporations, because they,
Fascinating.
yeah, because Cyberpunk's whole thing is that eventually corporations gain so much power that essentially they form governments of their own.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah, so this is actually, like, I think something that the creators of the game looked at the current, world, geopolitical and commercial, or should I say geopolitical and economic world order, and sort of like thought, if we just let corporations just keep on growing at the rate that they're growing without checking their power in some way, shape, or form, what would happen? And this is what they came up with. The idea then that corporations could then actually stage wars. Right. And, that got me thinking about, yes, it would be good for us, as in our previous segment, to start breaking up these tech companies, right? Because I wouldn't want a Cyberpunk 2077 situation happening where people that work for corporations can go to war, right? And essentially it's okay because the governments are fine with it, right? It's national interest, But at the same time, like, if we decide to break up, I'm not saying Google's going to become a huge private military corporation, right? But if we break up the Google army now before the Google army can form, then who's going to defend us when Tencent decides to invade us at some point in the future?
Man, that's Cyberpunk. That was the perfect note to end this podcast on. We just went like full dystopian.
Full dystopian. Because you know what? Like, I'm just going to sum this up. This is actually probably going to be the new Cold War. I know.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it seems like it already is the new Cold War, right?
Right. Yeah, because you have like the U.S. and the EU sort of like on one side, then you have China, Russia, on the other, and it's just like, I feel like we're there's no real open hostility as of yet on the informational side. Like, there's a lot of information, rumors going around that Chinese tech companies are raising money to try and, raising money to buy over like Western game companies like EA and Take-Two, right? As part of their, cultural takeover of the West, so to speak, right? And like it's being played out on so many different fronts. Technology is one of them. Like, information technology is one of them. Google is already locked out of China, for example, right? And I think this is just going to keep on getting worse. So what do we do to stop this from happening, right? Do we then try to end the Cold War before it becomes a hot war, or do we just let Cyberpunk 2077 happen?
Since we're on the Cyberpunk thing, man, let's just roll with that.
Okay. All right, let's go with that. All right, Aaron, I have taken up so much of your time, and I thank you for taking time out to discuss big tech with our audience today. Oh, it's a
Yeah, dude, my pleasure. Great conversation. We touched up on a lot of points. We'll probably have a lot more points to touch up again recently. Actually, just a quick shout out to our blog. We touched up on a lot of this stuff recently. There's some news with iOS 14 update and how that affects Facebook, and it's interesting because we got some data sharing implications there and how that affects marketing. So it ties into this really nicely, and it's one of the better blog posts that we've done in a while. Really proud of my team for putting it together. So if you guys get a chance and you want to know more sort of like in this sort of topic, check out the blog post.
All right, awesome. And I guess I was going to say, do you have anything else to say? But I think that's the thing that you wanted to say.
That's my plug. I'm done.
That's your plug. You're done. All right. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thank you so much for tuning in today's episode. My name's Rafi. His name's Aaron. You've been listening to Not Another Digital Marketing... Let me try that again. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you have been listening to another episode of Not Another Digital Marketing Podcast brought to you by First Page Hong Kong and Singapore. Cheers, Aaron. Peace out.
See you, Raf.